Hey guys, it's Melissa. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Melissa Ellen and I do true crime videos. Usually I do missing persons and unsolved cases. This week though, I want to talk to you guys about a series I was watching on Netflix. It's called I Am a Killer Released. If you haven't seen it, I don't even know what to tell you. I want to say go watch it, but at the same time I'm like, don't, because I'm going to get too far ahead of myself. So I turned it on the other night. I was just like cleaning up in the living room and I just turned it on and I'm listening and I was like, oh, okay. So my initial thought was, this is going to be a story talking about death row inmate who is released. He ends up serving time and he ends up paroled. First of all, normally parole off death row. So I was like, oh, how? There had been like 1,100 people that had been sentenced, and then 200 of them got life sentences, and then 7 of them were actually released. Because of the changes in the laws, they were able to get parole. So I'm like, okay, so then I'm intrigued, okay? I don't have an opinion on the death penalty. I do, I don't, I go back and forth. I am so individual to person that it's very hard for me to have an entire stance on how I feel about the death penalty that I would publicly share with you guys. Okay. So I'm interested and I want to keep learning more and I want to keep having an opinion. So I'm like, okay, this guy's going to have a story about maybe he made a mistake, maybe he wasn't him, and why he ended up deserving or earning parole. Okay. Oh, they pulled me in. They tricked me. I got tricked. Bamboozled. Is that the word? I'm so mad. So I'm in the living room. My husband's in the dining room. He's doing something in there. And so we're both kind of listening. And you can literally at the same time, we're both like, what the fuck? Wait, what did he do? Huh? And then it was from there. It was a roller coaster of emotions that wouldn't stop. We literally haven't stopped talking about it. I watched it again and we're just annoyed. We're flabbergasted that this crap is even out there. And then I'm just intrigued as to what was the producer, the writer of this series, what was his point? What was he trying to get across? And I just honestly have to say, I have questions. Why did you leave off there? Why did you present this? Why didn't it leaves you. So I thought what I would do is I would walk you guys through the episodes and kind of explain to you how it was presented and why I'm like this right now. And then I would tell you about the research that I did further to kind of it doesn't match. And I believe in freedom of speech, so I obviously believe in freedom of expression, and I do believe that people should do documentaries from both sides, and even when it's uncomfortable, I do believe that it is important that all sides are presented because we learn. So even if that person is wrong, we learn from what they shared. It's important. And I don't think that Netflix is required to suit my opinion and not put up things that are absolutely shameful, absolutely disrespectful to victims of crime in any way, shape, or form. I don't want them to, but I get why they do, because they're always going to present different things from different perspectives. But it's just, this is weird. I cannot believe this show is out here. It is so disrespectful to the victim. Yeah. Okay, so triggers, we're going to talk about murder. We always do that. But we're going to talk about homophobia. We're going to talk about some Christianity mixes. It gets weird. But I just want to warn you guys. And I have very strong opinions. I do not in any way condone homophobia. What is your point? It is 2 humans, their decision. Seriously? Just mind your business if you don't like it. And if you believe that it's an abomination of God, then don't practice it and don't hang out with anyone who does. That's my opinion. We're going to get into that too. So, all right, guys, I think I rambled on enough. This is going to be more like I just have opinions and I just have to share them with you guys. So I want to know what you guys think down below. And I want to know if you guys like this. And then you should tell me which other documentaries I should watch. And that'll also send me into oblivion. And then I'll do these for you guys every so often. So let's go ahead and jump right into the video. All right, guys, so before we jump into this week's video, last week we talked about a missing woman named Andrea Knable. I just want to make sure I pop up her face again, give you guys another chance. If you haven't watched that video, go check it out. She helped find missing people. She was involved in a group called Missing in America and was dedicating to help finding missing people, just like us, guys. So I want to make sure we're sharing her face because she is still missing, and it's been over a year. And her case really is not getting the attention that it deserves whatsoever. I'm surprised that more people aren't covering it. And yeah, there is a lot of people saying that there are sightings of her. So it's very up in the air. She really might actually be out there. So I want to make sure I'm sharing you guys her face, and then I'll link the video down below. But this week, we're going to talk about the murder of John Zeltner. And I want to start with that because before we even get to the show, it's not about Dale Sigler, okay? Dale is the murderer. John is the victim. John died, and he was murdered by Dale. John was almost 31 years old, and he was an openly gay man, and they lived in the area of Texas, and he worked at Subway, and he was literally known as being a super, super, super kind, gentle, loving, funny, laughing all the time, someone you could always count on kind of person. Now, he was the firstborn of his father. We don't get a lot of his history, but what I gathered is that his father had him, and then his father went off and had other children. So in his 20s, he actually went out and sought to find his half siblings. So they talked to two of his brothers, which would be another John and Forrest, and they loved him. They adored him. And they said that one of the things that was a big deal was, this is back in the 80s, okay? John was openly gay, and even his father accepted him. And I know that that's what we're supposed to do, but back then people didn't do that so easily. So he didn't raise him. He went and sought out these family members and got close to them, and they didn't mind at all. They loved him. They're like, that's okay. And they called him Johnny Bell. So they said, that's Johnny Bell, and that's totally fine. So his two half brothers were interviewed. They talked about their father, and everyone loved him. They were out fishing, and they said if Johnny was here, he'd be cracking laughs, hanging out, drinking a beer, and having a good time. And that's the kind of person he was. So as I mentioned, he worked at the Subway, and he was working late nights, okay? So we're going to get into April of 1980, and I'm going to start with how the series starts. And just remember, at the end of the day, it's about John. John was the victim, and he was murdered, and Dale Sigler is his killer. And we're going to have this discussion. It's going to first start with, what is the appropriate sentence for murder? And that is the opening line of the show, and it is a common theme because it's something that resonates with me all the time. What is the appropriate sentence? Couple of years, all the years, their life, death? How do you make that decision? And I know we all sit on the fence in different ways, and I just always think of, I'll take myself, okay? What if when I was 20, 21, 22, before I had my son, and I was out hanging out at bars, and not running the streets or anything. I had a great job and everything, but I was out at bars and having fun. And there were times in my life where, I started to get in between things. I remember there was a bar fight one time, and I jumped in the middle of it. And I think about all those times, and what if I had jacked up? What if I got into a fight with someone and grabbed a beer bottle? Or what if I got in my car and drove home? These are things that I wouldn't normally do, and it's not who I am in any way, shape, or form. I'm not known for that, and I would never do that. But what if? What if? So I always think about those situations, and those are the times where I think, is life really the answer? When it's not the person and who they are, but they did it, and they messed up, or they snapped, or they overreacted. We've heard about these fights where a guy gets in a fight with another guy at a bar, and he punches him one time, and he kills him. Does that person deserve to go to death row? Does that person deserve to never have a chance at life? It's so much. It's hard for me. And then I think of all the times that they have had someone on death row or life in prison, and they were innocent. They didn't even do it. So I'm very conflicted, and I don't have the answer. Just so we're clear, I don't have an answer. Every case is different for me, because sometimes I look at the person and I see what they did, and I read it all. There's all the proof and there's all the charges, and I'm like, why do we need them in society? Why do they need to be here? So their family can visit them? Because what about the victim's family? Okay, so that's where I'm at. Sorry, didn't mean to go on a whole tangent of it, but I just wanted you guys to understand as we enter this, I am very interested in your guys' opinion. I really am. I trust you guys. You guys have given me so much insight, and I'm really curious, because that will help shape how I present these cases to you guys. It really does. Not like you change my mind, but you're helping open my mind. All right, so let's do this, guys. I actually have pages and pages of notes. I had put together my thoughts on it and I was going to present it that way. And then I decided to go back and rewatch, torture myself further, and rewatch all 3 episodes and present it for you guys in order of how it happened. So the episodes are only about 30 minutes each. So it's actually a pretty quick, easy watch. All right, so we're going to start with episode 1. It starts out and it's talking about the death penalty was reintroduced in 1976. 1,100 people had been sentenced to death in Texas. And of that, 270 were either commuted or overturned. 7 of those people were able to actually walk out of prison. And this is going to be the story of one of them, which is Dale Sigler. And it starts out with a line of, what is the appropriate punishment for murder? Okay. And it's intriguing. I'm in at this point. I just want to kind of give you guys how my emotions were, because at the time I'm like, okay, I'm interested. Like what's going on here, Dale? Like, tell me what happened and let's see whether or not this man deserves a second chance. Spoiler alert, no. One of the things he does say, which is the reason I kept watching it, is he started out by saying that if he had been sentenced to death, he felt that he would have deserved it. And then he said that he felt like God had bigger plans for him and that was where he wanted to put his heart at. And then he wanted to dedicate himself to God, which I'm all for. That's not the problem. You're going to see how this gets twisted in a way that I can't stand. So my mockery, I'm trying not to have it, but I'm like, okay, cool. You found God and you're become a minister, which is what he does. And he's going to live a good life. So I'm in, I'm watching, right? And he tells you his story about his childhood. His mother had him at a very young age and that he had some siblings, and that the mother moved them around a lot. And he also mentions that he had some things happen to him in his childhood, specifically that he had been molested at the age of 10, which caused him during his teenage years to be involved in some crimes. And by the age of 20, he was homeless and living on the streets of Texas. Okay, so a very sad story. He didn't grow up with a good childhood. He said that things that had happened to him were so bad that one time he tried to talk to his mother about it and she couldn't even handle it and just went in her bedroom and shut the door. So we're presented with what might be a completely true story, and it's sad. I mean, I feel bad. I don't want anybody to grow up like this. And do I think that these kind of traumas in a child's life does lend to the possibility of these things happening? Yeah, of course. We see it happens. So I do feel sorrow. It's just really hard to believe him. So I do feel sorrow for this happening to someone. And I do understand where it can lead to this not a good lifestyle, where you're living on the streets, where you're doing drugs, where you're homeless, and what can happen and how you could be involved in a robbery. Okay, we're getting there. At this point, he explains that on the night of April 7th in 1990, that he was high and he went to a Subway and he robbed the person there. He explained that he walked in, he knew the guy, and casually chatted with him, chit-chatted for a minute, and then pulled a gun and robbed him. And when the man, John Zeltner, okay, this is John, you murdered John, and that when John got scared and ran off or something, that he shot him. The actual, I'll give you guys at the end, but the actual affidavit, I looked it up, and what he stated was that he had went into the Subway and that he chatted with John, pulled out the gun, robbed him, followed him into the back of the store, shot him twice in the back of the head, and then when he fell onto the ground, he put the remaining clip, which was 4 more shots, into the back of him. So yeah, like an execution style. It's not your typical robbery. It's very malicious and brutal and feels very personal. Yeah. It made police very uncomfortable. When customers found the body a couple minutes later after Dale had left, it was a gruesome scene, okay? So that's what he says happens. He says that it was just during the commission of a robbery. He stole like $400 and he took off, and that's what happened. And then he was telling people about it, so he got caught. And he's totally remorseful about it. Kinda. We'll get there. So at this time, we're still in episode 1 of the first season, and he still is appearing remorseful. I'm sorry, but I'm not on Dale's side. I've seen some people who are. I'm not. I can't. And I'm trying to hide it, but I can't, because I'm just not that kind of person. Ooh, the shock, the suspense. But no, you get it now. I'm already annoyed. So he does say that at this point that he had selfishly taken a life, and that he knew that he had hurt someone's family, and that it was something that he would never be able to forgive himself for, and that he apologized wholeheartedly from the bottom of his heart for what he had done. So again, like as I'm watching this, at this point, I don't know any of this other stuff. So I'm like, man, I mean, like, it's not fair though. You murdered him for money, and like, why should you ever get out? But like, okay, I'm considering, you know what I mean? Because he seems genuine and he seems kind and he seems to really care. When I watched it the second time, I'm like seeing every red flag. I'm like, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. But when you watch it the first time, like, I always want to believe in people. So you kind of wanted to believe what he was saying. At this time in the episode, we actually meet the detective who handled the case, which is a detective, Tommy Lenore. And he's there at the subway and he's explaining that, you know, robberies and murders happen hand in hand often, unfortunately, but that this one was senseless, that it was brutal, that it appeared execution style. As I was telling you, he left John laying in a pool of blood, and it was very, very vicious, and it was a heinous crime. And it was very obvious from immediately that something was wrong, and this person was brutal. Like, whoever did this was a brutal person, and either they enjoyed killing people or they were just that mean of a person, because this was serious. Because this didn't appear to be your normal shooting from a robbery. So as I said, 6 days later, it was exactly when Dale was actually arrested. And they say that he immediately admitted to what he did. I know that he signed a statement that went over everything he did. So at some point in time, he did tell them and admit, and he gave them the story. But yeah, he went into the subway, he chatted with John for a second, and then he pulled out a gun, robbed him, and then followed him in the back and shot him. And then left with the money in the store. One of the things he was sure to make sure he did is that he used his jacket to open and shut the door, so he didn't even leave fingerprints. So very calculated. We also meet the prosecutor, which was Greg Miller, and he was the prosecutor involved in prosecuting the case in 1991. And he says the same thing. All murders are bad. There is no good murder. But some murders are worse. And he felt this was worse. And this is where we get into the first consideration of him going on death row. So when they were seeking for the charges, the original charges they were looking at would have made him eligible for parole after 15 years. And they did not feel that that was in any way enough. That's not 15 years for a robbery and murder and 6 gunshot wounds, 2 to the head and 4 to the back. So that's a lot. And so 15 years wasn't enough. So they sought the death penalty. So then on March 1st of 1991, Dale was found guilty of premeditated murder. He went there with the intention to rob him and kill him. They don't give you that inside of the documentary at all. At all. Like, they give you just like this kind of vague hint that he was going to there to rob him and maybe he was willing to shoot him. But like, there's a lot more when I pulled up the appeals, when I pulled up the court records, when you're digging a little bit deeper. So in the very beginning, when I'm like, Netflix, I have questions. Hello, like, how did anyone not say you're missing info? Like, you're missing key info no matter what side you're on that needed to be included. It felt to me like just a lot of letting Dale run his damn mouth. That's what it felt like. And it's not interesting. And I'm not... It was interesting at first. All right, I'll tell you that. It was interesting at first. Kind of like a, you know, like they say, a train wreck and you just have to keep watching. Like, okay, it was kind of like that. So he enters death row in 1991. He gives you this sad story about, I'm sorry, I'm getting more mockery as I go. But he gives you this sad story about how when he got there, one of the guards actually would do like the whole Green Mile thing where he's like, dead man walking. And he said at that moment, and when he first hit a sale, that he dropped to his knees and he talked to God. And he expressed, which I'm all for. I do think that finding God and finding some sort of higher power is the only way to get through things like this. When you're in prison or you have addictions and everything, I believe in this. So I'm all for it. And I'm like, okay, good. I mean, maybe he did. Maybe he really found God. Then he says some things that, how do I say this? Let me just say that I have experience with someone going through a program that involved a lot of higher power. And I knew that that person was a freaking liar. And I knew the things they were saying. So when I would hear them repeat back the exact same things they learned, it became very obvious which people inside of that program were faking it and which people were sincere, because in my opinion, the ones that were faking it, they just would catch like taglines and catchphrases, and it would become like their motto and their mantra. But it's like you're saying the exact same thing and you never actually explain what you're saying. So like same thing, he says he drops to his knees and he talks to God, and then he starts hearing a voice in his head that's telling him all of these things. I'm not going to say that people don't experience God, whatever. I'm not going to defend myself. You guys see where I'm going with this? Like, it's just bullshit. I don't believe Dale. That's what it comes down to. Like, it's possible, but I don't believe Dale. So now Dale, who says that he hears a voice, which is God guiding him, gets a break. I mean, let's be honest. I've seen it written a couple different ways in different articles, but basically he had a savvy lawyer and they found something they could work with. So in 1993, there was an amendment in Texas to the law that had to do with the jury selection. And his lawyer, if I could understand this, like I read it like 20 times and whatever, was able to use that argument that if the jury selection law had changed, then that meant that his death row sentencing was invalid. And they presented it to a court and they were able to get his sentence changed to life instead of death row. Okay, so whatever legal jargon loophole that they did, he was off death row after 3 years and he was in a life sentence. Now, here's the thing. In the state of Texas, if you have a life sentence, you are guaranteed that you get a parole hearing after 30 years. Okay, this is to look at, like we talked at the beginning, okay? I hope a majority of us do realize that there have been people that have caused the death of other people and do not deserve the death sentence or to be in life or prison. That there have been some instances where, as much as we don't want to, that we understand that mistakes were made and that forgiveness can be granted. There have even been families of victims that agree with this, that they have chosen to forgive the person and support them being released. So there are these stories out there. So this is why, and I don't have any problem with granting a parole hearing after 30 years. I have massive problems with this one because he was granted parole. Let me tell you why. Getting ahead of myself again. So he's now dedicated his life to God and he becomes an ordained minister. So I'm still in episode 1. He's still presented all this. I don't know anything different and everything seems fine, okay? Like he made a huge mistake when he was 20 years old or 21 and he was high on drugs when it happened and he was robbing a Subway and he killed a guy because he kind of knew him and he didn't want to get ID'd. Horrible, but I don't know. That's up to a parole board to sit and really look at the facts and really look at the person and decide whether or not they're eligible. And so I'm thinking like, okay, so this guy must be actually an amazing person because I know that he got released. Hi, it's in the title. So I'm thinking he must be this great person in order for them to grant him parole. Another thing to mention, I don't know when I was going to fit in, but at some point in time, they talk about how he was a model citizen in prison. Like, that's not true either. And some things happen that make it very obvious. So he ends up meeting a woman by the name of Carol Whitroth. And he calls her Mama Carol. So this one's an intriguing relationship. And I don't want to say too much because she is a beautiful, wonderful, sweet, precious soul of a woman who needs to be protected from what I can tell. So Mama Carol is 71 years old. Dale is 53. They supposedly have like a mother-son relationship. So apparently she had a stepson who was in prison at the same location as Dale. And I say stepson and my brain is racked, but I don't want to dig into Carol because I'm like, well, where's her husband? Is she divorced or widowed? Either way, it is the perfect person for Dale to prey upon. She's 71 years old. She's there visiting her stepson in prison. So now we know she visits and they're writing. So we know she writes. And apparently she sees Dale and she thinks that he's just an amazing man, seems so kind, so wonderful. And her stepson asks her if she wants to pen pal with Dale. So they've been pen paling for 9 years. 9 years, stacks of letters. They're pen paling back and forth. He calls her Mama Carol. They sign everything, I love you. I don't know. Okay. But it is said that he considers her a second mom. In order for him to even get parole, he does have to have some things in line, like a place to live in Texas, which he does not have. His mother lives in California and she is in ill health and unable to travel, and he can't go live in California. He has to live in Texas, and his mother is not able to move to Texas for him to live with her. So he has to find someone to live with in Texas. And he knows this, and he's always known this. He has to find someone to live with. So it kind of seems coincidental that he builds this bond with Mama Carol, because when he paroles, he goes to stay with her. And apparently she said when he asked that she kind of was like, and immediately was like, no, it's the right thing to do. He deserves it. Like, it's the Christ thing to do, because she's a good person. And when we meet her, she's got her cats and she's got her little trailer and she lives in rural Texas. And she says that she feels like her place is to take care of the lost, that she finds these animals. She's got this kitten that she nursed. This reminds me of my mama. And this is who she is, that she takes people in and takes care of them. And so it fits right in. It's a perfect person to take care of Dale. So in 2019, when he gets the news that he can be paroled, he is going to go and live with Carol. And part of his parole is that he will have to live with her for at least 12 months. There's all kinds of other restrictions. We're going to get into those in the next episode. But yeah, it's a lot. So one of the interviews they did with him was actually on the day in 2019 when he found out he was going to be paroled and he was going to be leaving in just a couple of days. And they asked him, what do you think? And he was worried about adopting. He was worried about adapting to life on the outside. And he tells some kind of interesting stories, because I think about stuff like this, that, there have been people who said that when they left jail after being there for so long, that even the lights inside of the mall made some people sick because it's so different that they're not used to it. And then finally, in the last 10 minutes of this episode, we meet John's brother. So we meet his brother, Forrest, and we meet his brother, John. And it is very obvious that they're interviewed well before the end of the next episode, because they don't really know what happened. All they know is what they've read from articles. So they just know that he was a victim of a senseless crime and that he was killed during the commission of a robbery. And that's literally all they really know. They do know that John was gay and that he was open, and it always crossed their mind, could that have had anything to do with it? Just because he was openly gay in a time where people weren't, in Texas where that wasn't very accepted. So of course they wondered if that had anything to do with it. But as far as they knew, it was just a commission of a robbery, and they were shocked. They were absolutely stunned that Dale was up for parole, and then they were completely shocked that he was getting out. They said that they were not contacted, and I don't know who the parole board is required to contact, but that's John's next of kin. That's the victim's family. This is who Netflix is interviewing. This is who's speaking for him. So I don't understand how they were not contacted. This is the victim's family, and you're considering parole, and you don't even consider talking to the family. And so they didn't get to speak for John, and Dale was paroled. So yeah, like I said, they called him Johnny Bell. They considered him to be just fun and nice and sweet and a good person, and just, yeah. It's always when you see the family, I love that, because then you get to see a sense of who they were, and you get to hear about them as a person versus just this one photo that we just see over and over and over again. And it was just really nice to get to know the kind of man that he was, because at the end of the day, I know this documentary is about Dale, but this is John's story, because John's life was the one that was cut short. And this is when it was explained that John actually sought out his family. So he went out and found his half-brothers. He wanted to know them. He wanted them to be in his life. And they said that, like, from the minute they met, everything was wonderful. Everything was great. Everything was awesome. They had no problems whatsoever. And his youngest brother, John, he was only 16 when they reconnected. And he said that throughout this whole time, so it's quite a few years, they never had one bad word to say to each other. Nothing. They never even had a disagreement, because Johnny Bell was just really cool, really relaxed, and really laid back. And so it just kind of speaks to the kind of person that he was. And it's really important that we know that, because when we hear the story that Dale's going to tell later, it just makes you wonder a lot. And then we end episode 1 with Mama Carol talking about how she feels that Dale is a changed man. That being said, she also admits that she doesn't even really know what happened to send him to death row. But she also says that she feels that if he is, because I think he is, if he is doing this with her just to take advantage of her, then she's not really worried, because she does believe in God. and that he will get his reward on Judgment Day. So I get where she's coming from. I'm kind of that way with sometimes with people. I'm like, I know they might be taking advantage of me, but if they are, that's on them. And I don't really know, so I'm going to go ahead and fulfill what I said I would do. I definitely wouldn't take anyone off death row. I mean, like, I'm talking about, like, give a ride or let them borrow $20, but, like, I get where she's coming from. Sometimes you just have to be like, you know what? If they're a liar, that's on them. I'm going to do what's right in my heart. And I'm going to live with whatever consequences I want to live with for me. So then we enter into episode 2. Dale's not quite out yet. And Mama Carol is setting up the house. And she has a bedroom set up for Dale. And explaining that now he's going to have his own bedroom. He's more than his own bedroom. He gets out and he's got this nice bedroom with a big air mattress, which he kind of was shitty about. Like, oh, air mattress, I'm 275 pounds. And I don't know. That rubbed me. This was like the first time that I kind of was like, okay, I already was thinking, like, I don't know whether or not to believe you, but now I'm kind of getting snarky because it just seemed weird. When he gets released, she brings him back to the house and they're in the bedroom and she's like, oh, that's an air mattress. He's like, oh, yeah, I know, an air mattress. Hope I don't pop it. I don't know. It kind of bugged me the wrong way. Kind of little small points that get you going, right? And then she's like, do you like it? It's very obvious that she wants him to be happy. And I think it's just who she is. And she wants to make sure he's comfortable, but it just seems like she's trying. She really just wants to make him happy. And that worries me because that sets up a dynamic that's not healthy. There was also another moment. They're sitting down and he's eating like his first like meal. As far as I can tell, I mean, it seems like it's the same day. The crew's there recording. They sit down and they're having like fried chicken and, you know, and they're kind of talking a little bit about how this is nice because, you know, he doesn't have to hurry. He can have more than one piece. And I get it. And I genuinely think about that with some people because I know that some prisoners, this probably drives them crazy and they don't adapt well and it can mentally affect them. But he says something and I caught it on the second time. I didn't get to the first time. And he's talking about how the prisoners, they would like boom, boom on the table and they'd be like, that's it, let's go. And that it was like a signal and then they would all do it. And he would tell people, why are you doing that? You're adapting to prison life. And it's like, you're adapted to prison life. You've been there for 30 years. But like it was his way of being like, he was above them. And I didn't catch it till the second time, but it was very obvious that he felt he was better than them. It's also, as you go back and you listen, you talk about when he would minister to the others, that he would train them and teach them. And it starts to get a little bit of he always thought he was better than them. And when he starts talking about his younger life, there's something there. He definitely thought he was someone he was not. And then this is when it goes and we actually get to see one of his friends that was not his friend anymore, was his friend prior to the murder. And it's a man by the name of Sean Attila. Now, Sean is one of the only friends that was interviewed, and it was because he did testify at the trial. And he testified that after the murder, that Dale had came to him and was telling him all about how he did it. And he mentioned that one of the things he said was that I killed that F word for gay. I'm not saying it. You figure it out for yourself. So he said that. So then immediately you're thinking, did he kill him because he was gay? What? And I'm going to go with this theory. We're going to talk a lot about it at the end and what he claims. But I want to say this one now because I feel like Sean had a lot of insight and I think that he's right. He said that he doesn't think he killed John because he was gay. He thinks that he killed him and it was easier because he was gay. And that Dale was the kind of person who always wanted to be tougher and he wanted people to fear him and he wanted people to be intimidated by him and he definitely wanted to boast. He had been involved in a lot of things as a juvenile. I think it was like 3 robberies and then 2 more maybe after 18. So he ended up in juvenile hall. A lot of this I had to dig through articles, but he has a history of robberies and some things that he had done, but most of it was as a juvenile. I mean, this murder happened when he was 20 or 21 years old. So like, it's pretty quick. So yeah, he had testified about that. He also explained that yes, Dale knew John and he definitely wondered if at the time in Texas, it was definitely not okay to be gay. And it was definitely something where people would be like, I'm not. And definitely put on that like machismo persona to make sure that nobody ever confused them with being gay. I hated this time. Like, I can't believe it. I had a cousin when I was little, and he was gay, and he had contracted HIV. And I was a kid, like maybe 9 or 10. And I remember my mom taking us to visit him, and I was the oldest. And I remember asking, like, what's wrong with him? Because he was sick, and he was very thin and very frail, and he was ill, and he ended up passing away. And I remember my mom telling me that he's a really nice man, and unfortunately that got him sick. I mean, maybe I was like 8 when this happened. And I remember being like, well, that's not fair. And it was my mom's way of saying, I don't know what my mom was trying to say. And I wish, like, those moments when you want to ask her, like, what did you mean by that? But I know my mom, because my mom was so accepting of everyone, that I just don't even think she could fathom to say he was gay, because at the time that would have sounded like an insult, but it wasn't. It's just weird how times have changed. But yeah, it was definitely a different time. So now Dale's out, okay? And it goes back to Dale, and he's telling a little bit more about his story. And he's talking about that he regrets what he did, that he sincerely apologizes from the bottom of his heart for what he did. More just kind of like, and about this time, it's when it's becoming more and more evident that there's more to this, and that there's more to Dale, because he just, the way he keeps saying everything, that, you know, I regret it. And he adds, it's the way that he keeps making, he's so sad for him. His mother hasn't seen him since 1997, so it's been over 20 years that he's seen his mom, because she's in California and she can't travel. You killed someone, you're in prison. Like, I don't, like, where you have to feel bad for him, you know, and I get it, and that would suck. And then they're there, and he's at Carol's house, so he actually is able to get on a Skype or a Facebook call. I don't know how he does it, but he gets on a face-to-face phone call over the laptop with his mom, and it's a very emotional moment. You know, obviously she loves him. That's her son, and she cares, and she can't see him in person because she can't make it to California, and he can't leave Texas. So it's very sad, and I feel for them. I don't know if he was on Facebook or not, but I did find his Facebooks. If you guys want to go look, do me a favor. Do not leave any nasty comments on my behalf. Please don't include me in anything on anyone's personal page ever. Yes, the comments are interesting to read, and if you do that, you do you, but I don't encourage it, okay? Don't put yourself in the middle of that. There's enough comments that people are leaving. People are very against this. But then there are also a lot of his supporters that are like, he served his time. He's fine. He deserves to be free. And God bless you. Like, this kind of, I'm almost there. I'm going to get you guys to the point in a minute, because So then he's also journaling. This was one of the things that I think about this for all prisoners, okay? All prisoners that serve a long sentence, trying to acclimate back into society is very difficult. So he's talking about his goals, and you can tell the, like, maturity mindset. Like, this reminds me of something, you know, my 15-year-old would say. He says his goals are to get a job, get a 401k, and get medical and dental insurance, and buy a home or something like that. But it just struck me as right away, you want a 401k and medical and dental insurance. This is obviously someone who's been in prison, and they're taking classes, and they're learning about what people have out there, and their idea of, like, what success is just different. Like, most people don't instantly say, like, I want to live a great life and get a job and get a 401k plan. Because that's for when you were... Anyways, I just find that very interesting. You can tell his maturity is not quite there, because he has been institutionalized for 30 years, since he was barely an adult. Now, his parole terms are that this is the strictest. They consider this for the highest risk offenders in Texas. So he's on that level of parole. He's on a GPS tracker. He cannot leave his house without a 1-week advanced approval from his parole officer, and it has to be for an approved event, and he is not allowed to socialize in public whatsoever. Not a bad idea to consider putting more people on this level of parole, because then they have to take care of themselves. They have to find a way to make money. They have to find a way to get a job. They have to support themselves. Maybe they don't. They probably get good. Whatever. Okay, I'm getting too far out of it. But I just thought, wasn't the worst idea. So he's on this parole. Eventually, they do get a little lenient. He has to go once a week to his parole officer to meet up, to check in. And then he can get approvements to go to interviews and things like that. And eventually, after a month, he is granted and encouraged to attend church. We're getting there. Now we're getting there. Because this shit gets interesting at this point. before I tell you that about the church, okay? So one of the other things that's happening is that Mama Carol does mention that after a couple weeks, he is starting to get frustrated. He's getting frustrated because he can't really leave the house. So he's doing a lot of stuff on the computer. A lot of us get totally annoyed with passwords and computers and two-factor authentication. And that reminds me, two-factor authentication. If you guys follow Stephanie Harlow, support her. She's gotten locked out of her Google account, and now it's got me like on a whirlwind of research. And yeah, that's crazy. So just keep her in your mind, because I cannot imagine this happening to me, what she's dealing with. Like, she's lost her entire Google account, and we use Google. I'm not going to be using Google anymore. I'm going to figure something else out, because that scares the crap out of me. Like, my research, my life, my everything, my emails, you guys, everything is locked in that email. And I'm like, no, we're fixing that today. So I've been doing research on that, and what happened with her and getting locked out of her account, like, I cannot believe that. Anyways, so Dale is getting frustrated with computers, okay? He's getting frustrated with passwords and backups and understanding how to do this, and employers want you to email them, and he's getting frustrated with it, okay? And she's saying that she's concerned because he's lacking patience, that he wants everything to happen like tomorrow, and that's just not possible. And she's trying to encourage him to slow down. It's gonna happen, like, it's gonna be okay. But she's also stressed out. She mentions, like, he's probably not getting anything, because she's like, I have an extra mouth to feed, but no income coming in yet. And we're financially strapped right now. So she's supporting him. So the hope is that he can get a job. So then he goes to a job interview. Can you guys believe we're this far in and I still haven't told you what this piece of crap eventually says to justify why he did this murder? Like, we're almost there. Okay, this is how committed I was, because I'm watching this show and I'm like, I don't know. And all I'm thinking at this point is this guy going to reoffend? Should he really have a second chance? I mean, I don't want, because I care for the victim more than the murderer, but I'm like, is it possible? And at this point, I'm still watching, like, okay, maybe, like, at least he wants to get a job, and at least he has a good place to live. He's not hanging out with bad people. Like, Mama Carol's going to keep him as safe as she can, as long as he follows her rules. Like things are going to be okay. So I'm watching, right? And so he goes to this job interview. And again, another point of institutionalized when they're young, like, his thinking is not all there. And obviously the Netflix producer, what is this guy's name? I'm going to have his name for you guys in a little bit. I looked him up and now I cannot remember his name off the top of my head. It's somewhere in my nose. Okay, so I can't believe that they don't help him out a little bit so he doesn't look so dumb, or maybe this is all set up. But he goes to this job interview. It's at a temporary staffing agency or a permanent staffing agency, but it's a staffing agency. And he meets with a woman, and she's like, hi, okay, so, like, what kind of job do you want? And he's like, oh, I want to get a job in trucking. Okay, that sounds like a great idea. Do you have any experience in trucking? No. Do you have any certifications? No. Do you have driver's license? No. So when's the last time you worked? Oh, I bagged groceries back in, 1980. And she's like, yeah. No. I mean, it's just dumb. Like, why were they... I'm hoping that wasn't the whole interview and that was just part of, like, the setup for the show, because, like, you need to be applying to be a janitor, a cook, or a dishwasher. Like, you have to start. You have no experience and you've been in jail for 30 years. You need to take a break, and you're going to start with a basic job. You're going to get some experience working around people again. You're going to get some experience with how to follow rules in an outside environment. Like, you're not jumping in a truck. Not only that, he doesn't only just want to be a truck driver, because, okay, cool, maybe he can. I don't know what the rules are with, his record and getting certifications. Every state's different. I don't know. So maybe, and sometimes these schools and employers will actually pay you to get the certificate. So, okay, maybe it's possible. But he also he wanted a truck driving job so he could travel. Like, does he not realize he's on parole with a GPS tracker? Like, where were you going, buddy? I don't even think you can leave the city, even with a job. So it just didn't make a lot of sense. And it just leads to, like, his thinking isn't very mature at this point, because that's what he wants. And then he's disappointed. He does eventually find a job. We get that in episode 3, but I'll tell you that in a minute. And then this is the point where we get to hear his story. It seems fitting, life's hard. He's not getting the job that he wants. Everything's difficult for him. And now we're gonna give your boohoo fucking sob story that makes no shit. It's bullshit. Beep, 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 beep. I don't know how much I just had to bleep out right now, but okay. He says that nobody really knows the true story of what happened in April of 1990. That he tried to tell people the story, but nobody would listen. That his attorney greeted him by saying, you must be, what did he say, like the biggest idiot in the world. And therefore he didn't feel he could talk to him and that nobody would listen to him. But he had a story that wasn't the entire signed confession. It wasn't the entire story that was presented to the jury when you were on trial for death row. It's not the story that was presented when you appealed your death row and were granted a life sentence. It's not, it is the story presented to the parole board that granted you parole. And if I could find a little more information on this, I would give it to you guys. But let me give you the story that he decided to write to the parole board and where he was eventually granted parole. I hate this. And I hate to even tell you guys this part because it is such utter disrespect to John. It is absolutely disgracing his memory and his honor. And the fact that you got a second chance to be out there and then you use it to degrade the victim that you murdered, did you not do enough? He says that him and John were friends, which may very well be true. Casual friends or really good friends, okay? We know that he knew him. And he said that John was a really nice person because that's who John was. And he said that John would let him come over to his house occasionally to take a shower or to sleep on his couch because he was homeless and running the streets at the time. Very likely because that's the kind of person John was. He had a place. He was nice to people. He helped them. Unlike you, Dale. So he says that one night he was over at John's house, that he had came there to use a shower and he was tired and he fell asleep on the couch. And he says that he woke up and John was on top of him. He says that he immediately pushed John off and got angry at him, was like, why are you doing that? He says that he was so close to John that he talked to him and that he had shared things with him and that he was very open about the struggles that he was feeling and that he had shared with him that he had been molested as a child. He keeps saying, at the age of 10, I was molested. At the age of 10, I was molested. In a very the way he says it is uncomfortable. And it's not the way that I'm used to victims responding. But I will never say that it didn't happen because that is not my right to do that. I'm not saying that Dale is lying about what happened in his childhood. I just don't like that he is so comfortably throwing it out to defend his murder. And you can't say that he's not because he is. He keeps saying it every time it's brought up in order to defend what he did. So he says that John was on top of him. He says he pushed John off and they were kind of arguing and he was like, why would you do that to me? And he said that John said, and it doesn't even flow right and it doesn't make sense, okay? He says that John tells him, well, if you don't, then I'm going to tell everyone you did anyways. Do you hear Miley barking? Miley, are you mad too? Miley's pissed. She didn't like this episode either. So anyway, so he says this. I had to take a break for a second. All right. So he says this and he then says that he tells John that you better not tell anybody that. And if you tell anybody that, then I'm going to kill you. So his exact phrasing is that he was murdered someone who was blackmailing him into a homosexual relationship. This is what he says from now on, that he murdered John because John was trying to blackmail him into a homosexual relationship. All right. So then he said that a couple days later that he heard from some friends that John was looking for him. And he took that to mean that John was going to tell people that he was a homosexual and that he was going to kill him because that's what he said he was going to do. So he got a gun and he killed him over that. And then he just took the money to cover up the real motive. Because, he might be a killer. These are his quotes. I'm just going to give it to you what he said. He might be a killer. Might be a lot of things. He might be a killer. But he's not a homosexual. Yeah, because, God forbid. Like at that point, why didn't Netflix just be like, hey, let's just cut it right here, buddy. Like, we're done with you. No, we're just going to keep going and listen to his homophobic rhetoric and just make you want to like spit nails at him. The fact that he says that he's been villainized and that people have called him a monster and an animal, but he's not a monster. He's not. They just don't know what really happened. And he refers to what John did to him as abusing him. He literally says that when John tried to abuse me, it makes me so disgusted. And then we cut to John's family, his lovely brothers. I feel so bad for them. I didn't want to dig too far into their personal information, so I didn't look them up because I didn't want to accidentally flip any information in. I didn't want to accidentally slip in any information about them because I didn't want to look them up because this is heartbreaking. Like, I cannot believe this is happening. They are still being interviewed, having no idea that Dale is blaming their brother, saying that he tried to sexually assault him and that that's why he had to kill him. Blaming the victim. Really? I thought we stopped doing that. Like, I thought we were in a world where we don't do this anymore, that we don't allow people to blame the victim, that we don't give them a platform to make them seem like it's okay, because he not only does it for Netflix, he's preaching at the church. We're going to get that in the next episode. So we end episode 2 with him again repeating that he was being blackmailed into a homosexual relationship. And that's why he killed John. That was the real motive. And the robbery was just a cover up. So we start episode 3. Okay. And it's now 10 weeks after his release. And Dale has been granted the ability to go to church. Wrong church. I don't know this church. I actually didn't catch the name of the church. I did just watch a YouTube video by a really new YouTuber. She put up a video yesterday. I watched it this morning. I'll link it down below for you guys. She does like makeup and she does reviews of documentaries. So I watched it this morning and she said the name of the church. I didn't catch it and I probably shouldn't because I don't need them coming after me. But let's just say we don't agree. Dale gets up in front of the church and they encourage him to do his testimony. If you're not familiar with that, in the church, it's a very common thing when somebody has a story to tell and you feel that God led you in any way that you want to share your testimony. I was on drugs and I found God and I got better. Or, I was in financial ruins and I turned to God. And by being a better person and by belief in God, God led me to make better decisions. And therefore, I, want to thank God for my success. Things like that. And they're beautiful stories and I love this. Not so much Dale's. No, not for me. He immediately gets up there and says that at the age of 10 years old, he was molested. And then he spent time in prison because he killed a man who was blackmailing him into a homosexual relationship. Do you see like these buzzwords, like these phrases that they just throughout the entire episode are repeated over and over, word for word? And it's like that thing of when people come out of a recovery program, you can tell the ones that are just repeating and the ones that have adapted it into their lifestyle. And in my opinion, it just feels like he's just repeating. Like, you're in prison, you've been around a lot of convicts, heard a lot of stories, and you pick up on like which things got people free and which things didn't. And that's what it feels like. It feels like he picked up on phrases to say that would encourage people to feel bad for you and would encourage people to believe you. That's what it sounds like to me. One of the things he says, he refers to himself at some point as a victim. I mean, this is what he is. Like, this happened to him, okay? He says that he was going to be abused. So he's the victim in this somehow. But that because he's a murderer, that people don't understand him. And that's okay, though, because the people of God, the children of God, will understand him. I think what he is basically saying is that his people that he's around, that they're so against homosexuality that they will understand that he had to kill him. Duh. Because he would have said he was a homosexual, and that's an abomination of Christ. He says that. We're getting to that. So yeah, this is basically what he's saying, is that he's encouraging the whole church to understand him and not only forgive him, but accept him and agree with him that he made the right choice, because he's not looking for forgiveness. At the end of the day, he's kind of looking to be honored for what he did. It's very obvious. I hate this. I hate that this was on Netflix. Like, this isn't some, YouTube documentary that someone put together or a short film that's featured at something. Like, this is on Netflix. As if this is okay. This is wrong. Exactly. Some of the things that he said is being molested at the age of 10, scarred. I don't mean to make light of that, by the way. You guys know like how seriously I take things, so just please don't understand that obviously I care about, and I what I'm upset about is I feel that this person is, you run this for victims who really were assaulted, and I don't know if he was. I feel really horrible if he actually was. Don't do this to yourself. Don't put this out, and it's just not good. It's not good. If it is true, you shouldn't be putting it out like this and in wrapping it with a murder, because you're never going to heal from what happened, because you're using that to justify what you did. So then you can't get over that, because then your justification goes away. So you should keep that separate, and you should always heal things separate from each other. He says that it scarred and hurt him for life, that growing up with the stigma of being molested, and it made him question his sexuality and his manhood. So this made him, a lot of people said that they could see him willing to kill just to make sure that nobody thought he was homosexual, because he was that guy, that nobody was going to think that of him. And he was very boastful, and he wanted people afraid of him, and he wanted to be machismo man. And so it does make sense with some of the things he was saying about himself, that if he was molested as a child and he made him question into sexuality, that it would cause him to be more like, oh, I'm the man. And it, again, what we said, and that happened in the second episode when they were interviewing his friend Sean, and Sean said, I don't think he killed John because he was gay, but I think the fact that John was gay made him more vulnerable to him, easier, because Dale doesn't see a gay person as a threat or valuable or a man, okay? He's saying this in this, so you just have to put it together, because he said that this made him question his manlyhood. And so a gay man to him would not be considered a true man that he would be fearful of. So it makes it easier to kill him. It just makes a lot of sense. Not like sense like it should happen, but what his thinking was. So he says that 2 days after, John attempted to abuse him. Those are his words, not mine. Abuse him. That when he found out he was looking for him, so then he said he went to the subway. And according to him, when he walked in, John was like, oh, you came around to my side now. And that he shot him and killed him over it, because that's what he said he was going to do, so he had to do it. He says that again, after he'd been molested at 10, that 11 years later, that he didn't want someone to take what was his, that was his manlyhood, that was his rep, he had earned his reputation, and he was afraid that John was going to take it from him. Like, he thought really hard about this, because if it were anyone else, like, I see the thought process in explaining that someone could snap, but that would be if you're like engaged in a relationship with something and something happens like at home, and then you realize that this person had been through something traumatic that was causing them to have issues. But like, no, you were high on drugs, you went to the subway, you robbed it, and you killed them. Like, let's not spend 30 years in a cell to come up with a story and blame the victim and try to say that he was trying to blackmail you into a homosexual relationship. Just don't have one. Just like, if you're such man, fight him. I mean, no, I don't want him to fight him, but like, you shot him 6 times, you murdered him, and then robbed the store. It doesn't fit. Go tell your friends what they're doing. Like, tell people what's happening. It doesn't make a lot of sense to escalate, to get in the car or walk or get all the way to the subway and do this at 1 o'clock in the morning when you know he's there by himself, you know he's working alone. And let's go ahead and talk about, in a minute when we get to the records, the actual court records, about what really happened, because now it doesn't make any sense, because he planned this. He planned a robbery, not this whole story that he's trying to give now. One of the things that was interesting is in episode 1, we actually met Carol's grandson and his wife and their children. And, you know, they were very worried about Mama Carol letting Dale come and live with her. And then now they're meeting him, and I can tell they're kind of not sure about him, because the girl even says, like, he sure talks a lot. And then the grandson is like, yeah, well, you know, if you'd been in prison that much, you'd have a lot to say. I've been around people. She's like, okay. And they seem to kind of feel like Well, the grandson says, I would have done the same thing if someone tried to hurt me. So they kind of got this like really bullshit story, and they didn't know any of the facts of the case. So to them, it sounded like John assaulted him and he reacted, but it's not what happened at all. So I could see why, I don't agree with them, but I could see why they felt something about forgiveness and understanding and being like, oh, okay, well, it was 30 years ago, and that was something happened to him, so he probably freaked out, whatever. Even Mama Carol says that, like, he's got a lot of people they believe him and they understand him, and he's got a following, and every time he talks to people, more people are coming to him and more people are turning to him. My church is just so impressed by him that, his testimony and everything he has to say, and every time he turns around, he's just got more people are, believing him and following him. And I'm just like, oh, Lordy, is this guy like the next cult leader? Is this what we got to deal with? Like, it makes me very nervous, very uncomfortable with what kind of path this man is going to be on. And I know he's on parole for the rest of his life, so I guess I don't have to worry as much, but like, eek. So then, oh yeah, and he does have a YouTube channel. He posted a video a year ago. I found that too. So I don't really want to give it views, but like, whatever. I'll post it down below for you guys too, so you can see. I mean, it comes across, very like believe in God and follow. I just don't believe any of his shit. I just don't. You're homophobic crap. So then we talk to the detective. So now the detective Lenore comes back and they're let him listen to what Dale is now saying. And he couldn't have said it better. He literally says, I am very worried about society listening to this sort of irrational nonsense. He said, if this is true, it should have been presented to a jury. I'm not going to call someone a liar, but no. And society, exactly, Netflix, nobody needs to hear this. Nobody needs to hear somebody 30 years later blaming the victim. Nobody 30 years later needs to make a man feel ashamed that he was a homosexual. He didn't do anything wrong. He was working. You robbed him. And now this man is going to use this testimony to influence people at the expense of John's life. And his whole family doesn't even know what's going on. They don't even know what's going on until after. It's just very, very unfortunate. But yeah, the detective is like, I'm not going to say he was a liar because I don't know, though. And if that was what happened, he should have said that happened. And in all honesty, why? Why are you saying this? Because does it really matter which is you killed a man because you didn't want to be known as a homosexual or because you wanted to rob him? But the only reason you're saying you didn't want to be known as a homosexual is because you're adding that first part and trying to say that John assaulted you. So then we end up with an interview with Dale where they're talking to him a little bit further and asking, what could you have done? And that's when he's explaining, like, I don't think about what I could have done. I think that's a waste of time. You can't go back. It's done. It's done. Which makes me very uncomfortable because you should always know what you should have done better, or else you'll never know how to make a better decision. You can always say, like, that's uncomfortable for me because I know I can't go back, but if I could. But he's very like, no, I don't do that. I don't think about what I could have done. It's in the past. No, it's somebody's life. It's not a forgotten car payment. Like, it's kind of a big deal. He wants people to feel bad for him. He goes on again about how his lawyers ridiculed him, about nobody understood him, and that he had this stigma on him, and he was villainized. And then he has to reiterate, he did not kill John because he was gay. In his words, he is not homophobic and he is not judgmental. He doesn't have a problem with gay people. However, he does believe it is an abomination of God. Word for word. An abomination of God. He says that it is within the principles of God that they are deemed to live by, but that even though he thinks homosexuality is an abomination and wrong, that it's totally against God, that he doesn't judge anyone for their sexuality, but he doesn't want anyone to think that what he did was a hate crime. So he just wants to make that clear. No, it was. I do find it interesting. So whoever's interviewing him, ask him, do you think that there's any chance that John could have misread your signals? I mean, it's a valid question. If this is what you're saying, and he is just like, no, immediately no. And he's like, no, there's not a chance in the world based on the kind of man that I was, that there's any chance that he would have misread my signals. Like, basically being very like freakishly making sure, like, what do you mean my signals? I was a man. And yeah, there's gay men that are more manly than most men. Like, did you not learn anything? You've been in prison with a bunch of men. But anyways, like, to him, he's like, oh, no, I was a man. So again, you have a problem with homosexuals, just say it. You're judgy. You think that they're all one way. Like, just stop. You have a problem with homosexuals, so you don't really get to have any opinion on what a homosexual would have thought of you, because it's irrelevant. It's invalid. At this point, there is a pop-up on the screen that does let you know that despite the fact that he wrote the parole board, this is when he did it, 25 years after, he writes the parole board and changes the motive. He changes what happened. It doesn't change the outcome of the sentencing or anything to do with his time. I find it aggravating, annoying, pissed off. Like, I can't think of a big enough word right now, how much that bothers me. So that means that the parole board didn't receive some, well-packaged document saying that he was reformed and regrets what he did, a man of God, an ordained minister who was dedicated to being a better person, and that's why they decided to parole him. They received his bullshit story that John attacked him and he was blackmailing him into a homosexual relationship, and they granted him parole. Because if I were on that parole board and I saw what I thought, okay, different. I don't know. Maybe I would. You look through it, you make decisions. That's their job. But if I saw that some piece of freaking shit was changing their story to blame the victim 25 years later, and it's homophobic and full of freaking crap, that would be the first person that I'd be like, deny, no, send them back and have them, reevaluated, because they really need to consider their train of thought, and they need some therapy, and they need some counseling, and they need to be talking to someone, because the things they're saying don't make sense. And they're blaming the victim, and you paroled them? That just shocked me. You blamed the victim and got parole. I would have think that if somebody blamed the victim, they would be on the bottom of the list, because you obviously don't regret it. You obviously don't want forgiveness, and you're completely at risk of doing it again because you don't value what you did. You're blaming the victim. You're lying. And he got rewarded for his lie, in my opinion, allegedly. Whatever. I don't care. What are you going to do? Was Dale going to come after me? It's just my opinion. I mean, it really is. I don't agree. So they do end up showing us 3 months after he got out, he taken a job. He was working at a ranch. He said he loved it. He was working, driving Mama Carol's car with a cell phone and his laptop at home, and, driving out and just living his best life and working at the ranch and then going back to his house with Carol. Whatever. At some point in time, he lost that job or something happened, because we do get a credit at the end that says that after a year, he's still living with Mama Carol. He's looking for his own place. I don't know how that's going to work. And he's looking for a new job. And we do get some sort of a mention that John's family does not at all agree and will not even entertain the notion that John is in any way to blame for his murder, because he's not. He's the victim. He was killed. He was murdered in a robbery, and it's nobody but Dale's fault, not John's. And so that is all we get, and it stops right there. That's it. Poor Dale just, is gonna go. It's such crap. So I did a little bit of research, and obviously I read a bunch of articles. I was reading some, mostly there's just a bunch of reviews. It's very hard to find any news articles from when this happened. So I found a bunch of reviews, and then of course I did find the appeal documents, and just a couple things I wanted to share with you guys before I wrap this up for you. So in the appeal, the thing that was brought up was there was a bunch of points. I think there was like 25 points. And this was a response that answered to 2 of them. But the biggest one was they were talking about, in consideration, this was the appeal back. So that's fun. You guys are going to get the end of my video using my webcam. Yeah, yay. Yeah, my camera died and won't charge, and I need to edit this for you guys. So let me just tell you the end result of everything. When they had this appeal, It's my sticker to cover my webcam. So when they had this appeal, it came out that John was just really high on drugs and alcohol and was just having a hell of a banger for that night. And that he had mentioned to friends that he needed to get more money so he can get more drugs. And one of his friends suggested, hey, John's working at the Subway, why don't you go rob it? He also gave him like the complete layout of the store so it'd be easier. And then another friend lent him a .45 caliber gun and told him that it was loaded, and specifically the first cartridge was a expressly adapted exploding bullet. I don't know what that meant exactly. Like, that's not, the phrasing was weird to me, so I'm not exactly sure what they were explaining. An exploding bullet. Anyways, and when Dale leaves, he says that he would murder John if he needed to. And he ended up returning back to the friends and telling them that they would see John in the obits the next day. Yeah, he bragged about it. He had told one friend that he killed that F word, and he did not feel any remorse. He bragged about it. He took the money that he had, he used it, and he felt no remorse. So I'm not feeling very bad for this guy. So this was really intriguing. I'm going to leave you guys with this. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you guys want to hear more things like this, first of all? Like, do you want to see me? I love this. This was a lot of me cursing and yelling and losing my brain. Like, I could not. It was very frustrating, but it was intriguing. And I liked looking in because I don't feel that they did enough to give John a voice and any sort of remorse for what happened to him. So I'm happy to talk about him because that's what mattered, because John lost his life and there were people in his life that loved him. And I don't feel bad for Dale. And I don't want to feel your sob story when he's driving in the car and they see a Subway and he says to Carol, like, oh, I can never see a Subway again. Every time I see it, it just brings up old wounds for me and just reminds me of everything, and it just takes me back to that night. And I'm like, that must be nice for you, because John doesn't get to go back to that night. That's really what matters. So I'm a little disappointed. I know that Netflix, I know you have to present what you present, and we have to have different genres and different, opinions, and it's all intriguing. It's all for show, and I know that's what it's about, but I just feel like they could have at least spent a little bit longer with John's family. I feel like they could have added an extra episode to feature him, to care about him, to let it known that he mattered, and that it wasn't just about Dale's bullshit story about how he's an amazing found Christian who's a complete homophobe and has an entire church supporting him. But that's okay, because that's intriguing. So I know it's not always as, what's important isn't always as entertaining to talk about. So I leave you guys with that. Do me a favor, leave me some comments down below. Let's talk about this. Share it, whatever you guys do. Let me know what video you guys want to hear from me. I'm taking suggestions from you guys, because your guys' suggestions are, you guys are amazing. I tell you that all the time. I love you guys. So I'm going to wrap this video up because I feel weird. I'm looking down. My hair keeps falling. Anyways, I say this at the end of every one of my videos. Hug your babies and hug your loves. Life is precious. Enjoy every minute of every day. Do not, ooh, that light is bright. Do not take anything for granted. I love you guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.